Lieutenant Jason Walker ripped the target sheet off the wall, held it up in front of the whole squad, and laughed so loud it echoed across the range. "Look at this! Look at where Captain Carter's rounds landed. My grandmother shoots straighter than this, and she's been dead 6 years." He shoved the paper into Megan's chest. "You don't belong here. You never did. Somebody should have sent you home 3 weeks ago." And Megan Carter said nothing. She just picked up her rifle, walked back to the line, and let them believe she was broken. Before we go any further, if you believe that a person's worst moment should never define their entire life, take 1 second right now and subscribe to this channel. Stay with me all the way to the end of this story, because the truth about Captain Carter will not be revealed until the final minutes, and it will change the way you see her. And leave a comment telling me what city you are watching from, so I can see just how far this story has traveled. Now let's begin. For nearly 3 weeks, Captain Megan Carter had become the biggest disappointment at the United States Army's Advanced Tactical Readiness Center. That was not an exaggeration. That was the word people used when they talked about her, and they talked about her constantly. Every instructor filed the same report. She failed marksmanship. She hesitated in close quarters. She froze during simulated combat. Her reaction time, the paperwork said, was slower than that of the newest recruits who had arrived only days before. On paper, Captain Megan Carter looked like a soldier who had lost her edge and had no business wearing the rank on her collar. But there was something the paperwork could not measure, and there was something Jason Walker could not see. And that was the whole problem. "You want to know what I think?" Jason said that first morning, loud enough for the entire barracks to hear. He was doing pull-ups on the frame above the door, and he didn't stop, not even to breathe. "I think somebody upstairs owed her a favor. That's the only way a captain shows up here shooting like that." A young private named Ellis chuckled from his bunk. "She outranks you, sir." "Rank," Jason said, dropping to the floor, "is just a number on a piece of cloth. Out there, when the door blows open and the room fills with smoke, nobody checks your collar. They check whether you can move, and she can't move." He grabbed his water bottle. "You saw it. We all saw it. They had all seen it. That was the trouble." Master Chief Daniel Brooks stood in the doorway of the mess hall that same morning, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold in his hand 20 minutes earlier. He had been an instructor for a very long time. Decades. He had trained men and women who went on to serve in places that never appeared in any newspaper, and he had buried more than a few of them. He knew what a broken soldier looked like. He had seen it up close more times than he cared to remember. And Megan Carter did not look broken to him. She looked like something else entirely, and he could not put his finger on what. He watched her that morning at breakfast. She sat alone at the far end of the room, her back to the wall facing the door. Not near the door, facing it. Every time it opened, her eyes flicked up, took in whoever entered, and returned to her tray in less than a second. It was so fast that nobody else noticed. But Daniel noticed, because Daniel had spent his whole life noticing. He noticed that her tray was arranged in a strange, deliberate order. Fork on the right, knife turned inward, water at her strong hand. He noticed that when a chair scraped across the floor behind her, she did not jump, but her shoulders shifted just slightly, like a person quietly registering a threat and dismissing it. "You're staring, Chief," said a voice beside him. It was Colonel Ann Fielding, the officer who ran the entire center. She had a reputation for being fair and impossible to fool in equal measure. "I'm observing," Daniel said. "Same thing in your case." She took a sip of her own coffee. "You've read the reports on Carter?" "I've read them." "And—" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "And I'd like a few more days before I sign anything." Fielding looked at him. "You know she's on the list. Command wants a recommendation by the end of the cycle. If the numbers don't turn around, she's done. Reassigned or separated. That's not my call. That's theirs." "I understand. The instructors want her gone yesterday, Chief. Walker's practically campaigning for it." "Walker," Daniel said slowly, "talks a great deal for a man who has never once been shot at." Fielding almost smiled. "Watch yourself. He's the top of every board we've got. He's the top of every board that measures the wrong things." Daniel set down his cold coffee. "Give me the days, Colonel." She studied him. 30 years of trust passed between them without a word. 4 days, she said. "Then I need something on paper. And Chief, if you're wrong about her, it's your name next to mine on that recommendation." "I've been wrong before," Daniel said. "Not often, but I've been wrong." He walked away, and he did not stop watching Megan Carter for the rest of that day. The first thing he did was pull her file, not the training file, the real one. And that was where he hit the wall. Most of Captain Carter's service history was there in ordinary black ink. Enlistment, officer training, promotions, each one earned, none of them handed to her. Deployments in the usual places, commendations, more than a few. And then 2 years back, everything simply stopped. Not ended, stopped. There was a gap where a mission should have been, and over that gap were 3 words stamped in red. Classified, access restricted. Below that one line survived the censor's black marker. Transferred from active operational status pending psychological and physical evaluation. Daniel read it 3 times. He had seen redacted files before. He had never seen one that felt so loud in its silence. Something happened to you, he said quietly to no one. Something they don't want anyone reading about. He closed the folder, and he decided he was going to find out what. Out on the range that afternoon, Megan failed again. The drill was simple. Advance, engage 3 targets, reload, engage 2 more. Every recruit had done it 100 times. Megan raised her weapon, and her hands, which had been perfectly steady at breakfast, began to shake. Her first 3 rounds went wide. She fumbled the reload, dropping a magazine into the dirt. By the time she engaged the last 2 targets, the buzzer had already sounded. Jason didn't even bother to lower his voice. Time, he called out, or lack of it. A few of the younger soldiers laughed. Ellis the private did not. He had started to feel strange about all of it, though he could not have said why. Megan retrieved the dropped magazine from the dirt, brushed it off, and holstered her weapon without a word. Her face gave away nothing. Not shame, not anger, not frustration, nothing at all. And that blankness, that total absence of any reaction, was the very thing that made Daniel Brooks step closer to the fence and stare. Because Daniel knew something the young ones didn't. A soldier who truly could not shoot got frustrated. A soldier who truly could not shoot cursed, sweated, apologized, made excuses. A soldier who was genuinely failing showed you the fear of failing. Megan showed him nothing. And nothing in Daniel's long experience was almost never nothing. That evening, Jason Walker found Megan in the equipment room where she was cleaning her weapon at a table by herself. He leaned against the door frame with his arms crossed, and he watched her hands for a long moment before he spoke. You clean that thing like a surgeon, he said. Funny, you sure can't shoot it. Megan didn't look up. She ran the brush through the barrel with a smooth, practiced motion. Is there something you need, Lieutenant? Yeah, I need to understand you. He walked in uninvited and sat backward on a chair across from her. Because I've been trying to figure out how somebody makes captain and then shows up here shooting like they've never held a rifle. Doesn't add up. And I don't like things that don't add up. Then don't think about it, she said. See, that's the thing, I can't stop. He leaned in. There's 2 kinds of people that can't perform, Carter. There's the ones who never had it. And there's the ones who had it and lost it. I keep going back and forth on which one you are. Megan set the brush down. For the first time, she looked at him. And Jason, who had stared down instructors and drill sergeants, and men twice his size, felt something cold move through his chest. Because her eyes in that 1 second were not the eyes of a person who had lost anything. They were the eyes of a person who had seen too much. Neither, she said quietly, and she picked the brush back up. Jason left without another word. He told himself it meant nothing. But he thought about those eyes for a long time that night, and he could not explain why they bothered him so much. Daniel Brooks did not sleep much. He never had. So it was not strange that he was awake at 4 a.m, walking the perimeter of the facility with a flashlight he didn't turn on, moving through the dark the way a man moves who has spent his life learning not to be seen. That was how he found her. At the far end of the training complex in the abandoned close quarters house, they used for advanced drills, a single dim light was on. Daniel approached without a sound the way he had approached 1,000 things in the dark, and he stopped at a broken window and looked inside. And what he saw stopped his breath. Megan Carter was moving through the house alone. But she was not the Megan Carter from the range. This was a different person entirely. She flowed from room to room like water finding the shape of the ground. Her weapon was up and steady. She cleared each corner with an economy of motion that Daniel had seen in maybe a handful of human beings in his entire life. She reloaded, and her hands moved so fast the magazine seemed to appear in the weapon rather than travel there. She pivoted, engaged an imaginary threat, moved on, checked her back, all in the space of a single breath. Daniel stood at that window in the dark, and he understood that he was watching one of the finest close-quarters operators he had ever seen. Not good, not talented, one of the finest. The kind that came along once in a career if you were lucky. "My God," he whispered. And then in the same moment, another thought arrived and turned his blood cold. If she can do this, then the failures aren't failures. If she can do this, then every miss on that range, every dropped magazine, every frozen second is something she's doing on purpose, or something being done to her. He stepped back from the window before she could sense him. He was a careful man, but he was not careful enough because Megan Carter stopped in the middle of a room, tilted her head half an inch, and went perfectly still. She had heard him. Somehow over the sound of her own movement, she had heard the weight of one boot shift on gravel 40 feet away through a wall. Daniel froze in the dark. For 3 long seconds, neither of them moved. Then slowly Megan lowered her weapon, exhaled, and went back to cleaning her gear as though nothing had happened. She knew someone was there. She chose to let it go. Daniel walked back to his quarters and did not sleep at all. The next morning, he did something he had not done in years. He picked up a secure phone, dialed a number he had memorized long ago and never expected to use again, and waited. A voice answered on the second ring. Flat, careful. "Go." "It's Brooks," Daniel said. "Daniel Brooks, I need a favor and I need you to not ask why." A pause. "Brooks, been a while. What do you need?" "There's a soldier here, a captain. Carter Megan. Her file's got a hole in it 2 years wide, stamped all the way to the top. I'm not asking you to tell me what's in it." He took a breath. "I'm asking you to tell me if I should be worried about what's in it." A very long silence followed. The kind of silence that says more than words ever could. Finally, the voice said, "Where did you say she was?" "An advanced readiness center. Colorado. She's failing every test we put in front of her. And last night I watched her clear a house better than anyone I've ever trained." Another silence. Then quietly, "Brooks, stop testing her." Whatever tests you are running, stop. You don't know what you're doing. You think you're evaluating a soldier. You're not." The voice dropped even lower. "That's all I can say. Don't call this number again." The line went dead. Daniel Brooks stood there holding a phone that had gone silent, and for the first time in his very long career, he felt something close to fear. Not fear of Megan Carter. Fear for her. Fear of whatever machine had put her in that room and was now watching to see if she survived it. He did not stop the tests. He couldn't. It wasn't his call. But he started watching her the way a man watches a fuse burning down towards something he cannot see. That afternoon, the pressure got worse because that afternoon, Jason Walker made it his personal mission to break her in front of everyone. The drill was a paired exercise. Advance under simulated fire, communicate, cover, move. Megan was assigned to Jason's element, and Jason had decided that today was the day the whole facility saw exactly what he saw. "All right, Carter," he said, loud, cheerful, cruel. "Try to keep up. Or better yet, don't slow me down." The exercise began, and it went exactly the way everyone expected, right up until the moment it didn't. Megan moved slowly. She hesitated at the first corner. Her calls on the radio were half a beat behind. Jason was already pulling ahead and already narrating her failure to the instructors watching from the tower. "She's frozen again," he said into the radio. "Copy that. Carter's frozen. I'm advancing alone because my partner can't move. This is exactly what I've been telling you people for 3 weeks." And then something happened that nobody in the tower ever forgot. The scenario shifted. It was designed to. A hidden element in the drill triggered a simulated ambush from an angle none of the trainees had been told about. A device on the left flank released a loud, sharp report and a cloud of colored smoke, exactly the way a real ambush would announce itself all at once from the worst possible direction. Jason, who had been so far ahead, who had been so busy narrating his own superiority, was caught completely flat. He turned the wrong way. He fumbled his weapon toward the smoke. In a real engagement in that half second, Jason Walker would have died, and Megan Carter moved. It happened faster than the eye could follow. The instant that report cracked across the range, the frozen, hesitating captain simply vanished, and in her place was something none of them had ever seen. She dropped, pivoted toward the flank before the smoke had even cleared, brought her weapon up, and put a burst of simulated fire directly into the ambush point. Then, without a wasted motion, she crossed the open ground, grabbed the back of Jason's vest, and pulled him bodily behind cover a full second before the scenario's second trigger would have marked him as a casualty. The whole thing took maybe 3 seconds. Then the smoke cleared, the report faded, and Megan Carter blinked, looked down at her own hands as if they belonged to a stranger, and slowly, deliberately let herself go still again. The hesitation came back over her like a curtain falling. Within moments, she was once more the slow, frozen, failing soldier they all thought they knew. But it was too late. They had seen it. In the tower, Master Chief Daniel Brooks lowered his binoculars and his hands were not quite steady. On the ground, Jason Walker sat behind the cover she had thrown him into, breathing hard, staring at the woman he had mocked for 3 weeks. She had just saved his life in a training scenario. She had done it without thinking, without hesitating, moving faster than anyone he had ever served with. And then she had turned it off like a light switch right in front of him. "How?" he said. It came out as barely a whisper. "How did you do that?" Megan didn't look at him. "Do what, Lieutenant?" "Don't," his voice shook. "Don't you dare pretend that didn't just happen. I felt you pull me. I saw you shoot. You were faster than anybody I've ever. That wasn't a soldier who can't perform. That was nothing," Megan said. And now she did look at him, and her eyes had that same terrible depth in them. "Forget it happened." "I can't forget it happened." "Yes," she said quietly. "You can. Everyone else will." And that was the most frightening thing Jason Walker had ever heard, because he understood in that moment that she had done this before, that she had shown someone this and then made them unsee it, that whatever was inside Megan Carter, she had spent a very long time keeping it locked in a box, and it had slipped out for exactly 3 seconds, and it had terrified even her. Up in the tower, Colonel Fielding turned to Daniel Brooks. "Chief," she said slowly, "what in God's name did I just watch?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He was watching Megan walk off the range, slow again, small again, invisible again. "Colonel," he said finally, "I don't think Captain Carter is failing these tests." "Excuse me. I think she's passing a different test entirely. One we don't even know we're giving her." He lowered the binoculars. "And I think somebody put her here on purpose." That night, the story spread through the barracks like fire through dry grass. The younger soldiers argued about what they had seen. Some said it was a fluke, an accident, a lucky reflex. Others weren't so sure. Ellis the private was certain of what his own eyes had shown him, and he said so. "You didn't see it up close?" Ellis insisted. "I did. She moved like I don't even have a word for it. She moved like she knew the ambush was coming before it came." "She got lucky," someone said. "Nobody gets that lucky." Ellis shook his head. "Nobody." Jason Walker sat apart from all of it on the edge of his bunk, turning the moment over and over in his mind, and for the first time in 3 weeks, he was not thinking about how much better he was than Megan Carter. He was thinking about her eyes. He was thinking about how she had known which way to turn. He was thinking about how she had said everyone else will forget, with the tired certainty of a person who had watched it happen many times. And he was thinking about the one thing he could not shake. In that half second when the ambush hit, when his own training had failed him completely, the only reason he was alive to argue about it was that a woman he had spent 3 weeks humiliating had chosen to save him instead of letting him fall. He got up, walked down the hall, and knocked on the door of Master Chief Brooks's quarters. "Come," Daniel said. Jason stepped inside. He looked for once entirely unsure of himself. "Chief, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me." Daniel gestured to a chair. "Sit." Jason sat. He was quiet for a moment, gathering himself. "Who is she?" he said finally. "Who is Captain Carter, really?" Daniel looked at the young lieutenant for a long time. He thought about the redacted file. He thought about the voice on the phone telling him to stop testing her. He thought about the 3 seconds on the range that had rewritten everything. "I don't know," Daniel said honestly, "but I'll tell you what I've figured out. Everything you think you know about that woman is wrong. Every report, every score, every joke you've been making for 3 weeks, all of it is wrong." Jason swallowed. "Then what's right?" "That's the part I'm still working on." Daniel leaned forward. "But I'll tell you this much, son. In 30 years, I have met exactly 2 people who moved the way she moved today. Both of them came out of programs that don't have names, programs that don't officially exist." He held Jason's eyes. "So before you open your mouth about Captain Carter again, you might want to consider that the woman you've been laughing at could probably end any one of us before we finish blinking." And she chose today to save your life instead. Jason Walker had no answer for that. There was no answer for that. He walked back to his bunk in silence, lay down, and stared at the ceiling until morning. Megan, meanwhile, sat alone in the equipment room again, and she was not cleaning her weapon this time. She was sitting very still, her hands folded on the table, and she was breathing the way a person breathes when they are fighting to hold something down. Because the 3 seconds on the range had cost her more than any of them could imagine. For 3 seconds, she had let it out. And now the thing that lived inside her did not want to go back in the box. There was a name for what had happened out there. There was a name for what she had spent 2 years learning to bury. And that name was tied to a mission 2 years back in a place with no name on a day she would give anything to forget. A flash, a sound, a decision made half a second too late. Her whole team had survived that day. Every single one of them had come home. And she had spent every day since being told by doctors and evaluators and men in offices with no windows that this made her a success, that her team living was all that mattered, that she should be at peace. But nobody could give her back the half second, and nobody could tell her whether the soldier she had become on that day, the one who could clear a house in the dark and pull a man from an ambush before it happened, was still someone who could ever live an ordinary life again. That was the real test, not marksmanship, not reaction time. The real test was whether Megan Carter could be a person again, or whether she was now only a weapon that happened to be wearing a person's face. And she was failing that test on purpose every single day, because passing it terrified her more than anything on any battlefield ever had. You keep them in the box, she whispered to herself alone in that room. You keep it all in the box. You stay slow. You stay quiet. You go home. But the box had cracked today, and she knew with a soldier's certainty that a box that has cracked once will crack again. The next morning, Colonel Fielding called Daniel Brooks into her office and closed the door. I made a call, she said, about Carter. Daniel's stomach tightened. To who? I don't know to who exactly. That's the problem. Fielding sat down heavily. I went up the chain to request her full file. Real file. And within 2 hours, I got a call back. Not from my chain chief. From somewhere else. A voice I've never heard from a number that doesn't come up anywhere I can search. What did they say? They said, and I'm quoting, do not evaluate Captain Carter further. Do not separate her. Do not transfer her. Take no action of any kind regarding Captain Carter until you are contacted. Fielding looked up, and then they hung up. Daniel was very quiet. Contacted by who? They didn't say. The two of them sat there in the silence of that small office, two people with a combined 60 years of service, and neither one of them had the faintest idea what they had gotten tangled up in. Chief, Fielding said at last, what did we do here? What is she? I don't think we did anything, Colonel, Daniel said slowly. I think somebody set this whole thing up. The center, the tests, putting her under an instructor like Walker who'd push her every single day. He shook his head. I think we're not the ones running this evaluation at all. I think we're part of it. Word came down that afternoon quietly through channels nobody could quite trace that there would be a final evaluation. One last scenario, the most difficult the center had ever designed. Urban combat, hostage rescue, full team coordination, split-second decisions, everything at once. And the outcome of that single scenario would determine Captain Carter's entire future. Everyone assumed it would be another failure. Everyone except Daniel Brooks, who now suspected that failure and success had switched places somewhere along the way, and he could no longer tell which was which. Jason Walker heard about the final evaluation and felt something he had never expected to feel about Megan Carter. He felt afraid for her. He found her that evening sitting outside on a low wall at the edge of the compound, looking at nothing. He almost turned around. Then he made himself walk over. Captain, he said, can I sit? She didn't answer, which he took as permission. He sat a careful distance away. I owe you an apology, he said. The words came hard. For 3 weeks, all of it, I said things. I was wrong about you, and I was loud about being wrong. And that's worse. He stared at his hands. You saved my life yesterday. In a training exercise, sure, but you didn't know it was going to stop at a buzzer. You just moved. And you moved to save the guy who'd been making your life hell. He shook his head. I don't understand you, but I'm sorry. For a long moment, Megan said nothing. Then quietly she said, "You're not the first person to be wrong about me, Lieutenant. You won't be the last." "They're setting you up," Jason said suddenly. "The final scenario. It's rigged to break you. I've run it an old version. It's impossible. Nobody clears it. They're setting you up to fail one last time so they can push you out clean." Megan turned her head and looked at him, and there was something almost like kindness in her tired eyes. "Jason," she said, using his first name for the first time, "you think this is about whether I can clear a scenario. Isn't it?" "No." She looked back out at the nothing. "It never was." "Then what is it about?" Megan Carter was quiet for a very long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was so low he had to lean in to hear it. "It's about whether the person they need to clear that scenario," she said, "is someone they can ever let walk back out into the world afterward." Jason didn't understand. He would not understand for some time yet. But he heard the weight in it, and he did not ask another question. That night, a black SUV was already 300 miles away, moving through the dark toward Colorado, carrying a man whose name meant nothing to anyone at the center, and everything to the small hidden world that Megan Carter had come from. A Navy man, a commander, a person who had built a certain program with his own hands and had watched from a distance as one of its finest creations was quietly tested to see whether she could ever be fully human again. He had 3 words he had not said in 2 years, and he was carrying them across the dark like a loaded weapon, uncertain even now whether saying them would save Megan Carter or finish her. Back at the center, Daniel Brooks stood at the window of his quarters and looked out at the dark shape of the training house where he had watched her move like water 3 nights before. He thought about the voice on the phone. "Stop testing her. You don't know what you're doing." He thought about the redacted file and the 2-year hole in it and the red stamp over the silence. And he thought about the woman on the wall outside, the finest operator he had ever seen, sitting alone in the dark, deliberately failing test after test, because passing them frightened her more than dying ever had. "Whatever they made you into," he said quietly to the dark, to a woman who could not hear him, "you're still in there. I saw you. For 3 seconds I saw you." He rested his hand on the cold glass. "Hold on, Captain. Just hold on a little longer." Megan Carter sat on that wall until long after midnight. She did not think about the scenario. She thought about the half-second 2 years back, the flash and the sound, and the decision made too late, and the team that had come home anyway. She thought about the box inside her and the crack that had opened in it and how much it wanted to open the rest of the way. And somewhere in the dark, without her knowing it, the man who could open that box completely was drawing closer with every mile, carrying 3 words that no one at that center would understand until it was far too late to unhear them. She stood finally and looked up at a sky full of cold and distant stars. "One more test," she whispered. "Just one more. Stay slow, stay quiet, get home." But even as she said it, some deep and honest part of her already knew the truth. There would be no staying slow tomorrow. There would be no staying quiet. Tomorrow someone was going to speak 3 words, and the woman everyone had spent 3 weeks writing off as broken was going to disappear completely, and in her place, at last, the world was going to see exactly what Megan Carter had been carrying all along. And nothing for any of them would ever be the same again. The morning of the final evaluation arrived gray and cold, and the first person awake in the entire compound was Master Chief Daniel Brooks, who had not slept at all. He stood outside Colonel Fielding's office at 5 in the morning, and when she opened the door with her hair still wet and her coffee not yet poured, he said only 4 words. "It's happening today, Colonel." "I know it's happening today, Chief. I scheduled it." "No." Daniel stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "You scheduled a training scenario. That's not what's happening today. Something else is happening today, and I think you and I are the last 2 people in this building who don't know what it is." Fielding set her coffee down slowly. "Explain." "That call you got, the one telling you to take no action until you were contacted." Daniel leaned on the back of a chair. "I got one too. Different words, same message. Stop testing her. You don't know what you're doing." He let that hang in the air. "Colonel, in 30 years, I have never once been told to stop evaluating a soldier by a voice I can't trace. Not once. And now both of us have heard it inside the same week about the same woman right before the biggest evaluation of her life." He shook his head. "That's not a coincidence. That's a schedule. Somebody's been running a clock we can't see, and I think it runs out today." Fielding was quiet for a long moment. Then she said the thing she had been afraid to say out loud. There's a vehicle inbound, came through the gate log at 4:40, no unit designation, no advance notice, just a clearance code that my own security chief has never seen before, and when he tried to look it up, his terminal locked him out. She looked at Daniel. It's a black SUV, chief, and it's already on the property. Daniel felt something cold slide down his spine. Where is it now? Parked, east lot. Nobody's gotten out of it. Nobody's gotten out in 40 minutes. Nobody. The two of them stood there and neither one said what they were both thinking, which was that a man does not sit alone in a vehicle for 40 minutes unless he is deciding whether to do something he is not sure he should do. Inside that SUV, Commander Ryan Mitchell had his hands folded in his lap and his eyes closed, and he was in fact deciding exactly that. He had built the Phoenix unit with his own two hands. Not the buildings, not the budget, none of that. He had built the people. He had found them one at a time, the rare ones, the ones whose instincts ran deeper than training could ever reach, and he had shaped them into something the world had no word for. And he had made one promise to every single one of them, a promise he had kept even when it cost him everything, which was that he would never leave one of his own to be quietly disposed of by people who did not understand what they were holding. Megan Carter was the finest he had ever made, and 2 years ago, on a day he still could not think about without his jaw tightening. Megan Carter had made a decision half a second too late, and it had broken something in her that no doctor in any windowless office had been able to name, let alone fix. They had sent her here to fail. That was the truth Ryan Mitchell carried in his chest. The evaluation was never designed to see if she could still fight. Command already knew she could fight. They had put her here under the loudest, most aggressive young officer they could find in a program built to grind her down for one reason only. They wanted to see whether the weapon they had made could be safely retired, whether she could be an ordinary person again. And when she failed to be ordinary, when she kept the box shut and stayed slow and quiet the way she had been trained, they intended to read that as a failure of capability, stamp her file and make the whole problem disappear. Ryan Mitchell had one card left to play. 3 words. A phrase buried so deep in Megan's training that even she did not consciously remember it, a phrase that would strip away every layer of suppression she had spent 2 years building and show these people all at once exactly what they were about to throw away. The problem was this: he did not know if she would ever come back from it. The Phoenix Protocol was not a switch you flipped for a demonstration. It was a door, and he had never once seen it opened outside of a real operation, and he did not know, honestly, did not know whether the woman who walked back through it afterward would still be Megan Carter, or whether she would be gone for good. He opened his eyes, he looked at the gray building, and he made his decision the same way Megan had made hers 2 years ago, knowing it might be wrong and knowing there was no more time to be sure. He opened the door and stepped out. By 7 that morning, the entire center knew something was wrong, even if nobody could say what. The instructors moved differently. The scenario staff whispered. And Jason Walker, who had spent the night lying awake, cornered Ellis in the mess hall and said, "There's a guy, some Navy guy, nobody knows who he is, and everybody's acting like the building's on fire." "I heard he's got no rank showing," Ellis said. "Plain uniform, no name tape, and Sergeant Diaz said when he walked past the security office, 2 of the staff stood up. Just stood up. Nobody told them to." Jason's stomach turned over. For Carter. They're saying he's here for Carter. And that was when Jason Walker understood fully and finally that everything Megan had told him on that wall the night before was true. This was never about a scenario. It was about her. It had always been about her. And he had spent 3 weeks throwing rocks at something he could not begin to comprehend. He went to find her. She was in the equipment room, of course, sitting at the same table, and this time she was not cleaning anything, and she was not folding her hands. She was simply sitting very upright, very still, breathing in a slow, deliberate rhythm, and Jason recognized it now for what it was. She was not calm. She was holding herself together by main force. "He's here," Jason said from the doorway. "The commander. He's here for you." Megan did not open her eyes. "I know. You knew he was coming. I hoped he wasn't." Now she looked at him, and Jason took a step back without meaning to, because there was something in her face he had never seen on a human being before, a kind of dread that had nothing to do with fear of injury or death. "Jason, Whatever happens out there today, I need you to do something for me. Anything. If I change, she said it very carefully. If you see me change out there, and you will know it when you see it because you saw it for 3 seconds on the range. If you see that happen, do not try to talk to me. Do not put your hand on me. Do not get in my path. Just get your people clear and let me work. Her voice dropped. And when it's over, if I don't come all the way back, I need you to tell them the truth. That I was a soldier. Not a weapon, a soldier. Can you do that? Jason's throat had gone dry. You're scaring me, Captain. Good, she said quietly. Then you're finally paying attention. At 8, they were assembled at the entrance to the scenario complex, the largest and most complex urban training environment the center possessed, and the tension was so thick that even the youngest recruits had stopped talking. Colonel Fielding stood with a clipboard she was not looking at. Master Chief Brooks stood a few feet away with his arms crossed and his jaw set, and standing apart from all of them near the black SUV was a man in a plain uniform with no name and no rank, watching Megan Carter with an expression that no one could read. Ryan Mitchell had not spoken to her. He had not spoken to anyone. He had simply arrived and stood and waited, and his silence had done more to unsettle the entire compound than any speech could have. Captain Carter, Fielding's voice was steady professional, but Daniel could hear the strain underneath it. This is your final evaluation. Urban combat scenario, live team hostage element, full complexity. Your squad is assigned. Lieutenant Walker will serve as your element lead. A small, cruel arrangement that, and everyone knew it, though Fielding had not chosen it. Your objective is to clear the structure, neutralize all hostile elements, and extract the hostage safely. You have 30 minutes. Do you understand your orders? I understand my orders, Colonel. Then take your position. Megan walked to the entrance. Jason fell in beside her with 4 other soldiers. And as she passed the man in the plain uniform, she paused just for a second, and the two of them looked at each other, and something passed between them that no one else could see. A whole history in a single glance. Grief and trust, and something that was almost an apology running in both directions at once. Then she walked into the scenario and the timer started. The first 90 seconds were exactly what everyone expected. And to Daniel Brooks watching from the tower with a knot in his stomach, they were the worst 90 seconds of the whole ordeal. Megan hesitated at the breach point. Her calls were slow. She fumbled the first stack, moving a half beat behind the rest of the squad, and Jason, who had promised himself he would not found the frustration rising in him anyway, because this was a real scenario now with real complexity, and a soldier who moved this slowly was going to get someone marked as a casualty. Captain, we need to move, Jason said into the radio, and he kept his voice level. He really did try, but the tension bled through. First room on your call? Megan's call came late. The squad flowed into the first room, and it went badly. The scenario's designers had loaded the environment with fast, aggressive, hostile elements, and in the first exchange, one of Megan's soldiers took a simulated hit that marked him wounded. Jason's jaw clenched. In the tower, one of the instructors muttered, "Same as always, she's going to get them all killed, and then it'll be over." Daniel didn't say anything. But down at the SUV, the man in the plain uniform had not moved a muscle, and his eyes were fixed on Megan with an intensity that made Colonel Fielding standing near him feel as if she were watching a man watch a fuse. 2 rooms in the scenario got harder the way it was designed to. A second wave of hostiles, a complication with the hostage's location. And Megan slowed down even more until she was barely moving at all, until she was standing in the middle of a corridor, with her weapon half raised, frozen exactly the way she had frozen a dozen times before. "She's locked up," Jason said into the radio, and this time there was no cruelty in it at all, only a kind of desperate helplessness. "Chief, she's locked up. She's not moving. I don't know what to do here." And that was the moment Commander Ryan Mitchell decided he could not wait any longer. He stepped away from the SUV. He walked slowly and without a word toward the edge of the scenario complex, and the closer he got, the quieter the whole world seemed to become, until the only sound anyone could hear was his own footsteps on the concrete. Daniel Brooks came down out of the tower, fast-moving to intercept him. "Sir," he said, "Sir, I don't know who you are, but that's a live evaluation in progress, and I can't let you—" "Master Chief Brooks!" Ryan Mitchell said his name without turning his head, and Daniel stopped cold because he had never told this man his name. "You called an old number 4 days ago. You asked whether you should be worried." Now he turned and his eyes were the eyes of a man who had carried something very heavy for a very long time. The answer is yes. You should have been worried from the first day. That woman in there is not failing your test. She has been protecting every single one of you from herself every hour of every day since she arrived, and she is about to stop. Daniel's mouth was dry. Who are you? I'm the man who made her, Ryan said quietly, and I'm the only one who can bring her back. He looked toward the scenario where Megan stood frozen in a corridor holding a battle inside her own mind that none of them could see. Get your people ready, Master Chief. Not to fight, to watch. Because in about 10 seconds, they are going to see something that none of them will believe. And I need at least one person out here who understands that what they're about to witness is not a monster. His voice cracked just slightly, the only crack anyone had seen in him. It's the best soldier this country ever made coming home the only way she has left. Inside the corridor, Megan was fighting. Nobody could see it, but it was the hardest fight of her life. The box had cracked on the range 2 days ago, and it had never fully closed again. And now, with the pressure of the scenario building and building, with her soldier already down and the second wave pressing in, the thing inside her was hammering at that crack with everything it had. And she was holding it shut with the last of her strength because she knew that if she let it out here in front of all of them, there would be no more pretending. There would be no more slow, quiet, ordinary Megan Carter. They would see. And once they saw, she could never unshow it, and she would never be allowed to be a person again. So she stood frozen in that corridor, not because she couldn't move, but because moving meant surrender. And surrender meant losing the last piece of herself she had managed to keep. And then from outside, the scenario carried across the sudden silence of the entire compound. A voice she had not heard in 2 years spoke 3 words. Phoenix Protocol, activate. Everything changed. It happened so fast and so completely that the soldiers who witnessed it would spend the rest of their lives trying to describe it and failing. The frozen woman in the corridor did not startle. She did not gasp. There was simply a moment, a single held breath, in which the Megan Carter they had all known for 3 weeks ceased to exist, and something else opened its eyes behind her face. Her posture shifted. Her breathing dropped into a slow, machine-steady rhythm. Her weapon came up not raised but risen as if it had always been there. And the hesitation, the slowness, the fear, all of it fell away at once, like a costume dropping to the floor, revealing the person who had been standing inside it the entire time. In the tower, an instructor whispered, "What is she doing?" Nobody answered because nobody knew, and because what Megan Carter did next did not have a name. She moved. She did not clear the corridor. She erased it. She flowed forward faster than the scenario's hostile elements could react, and she was inside their timing before they even registered her engaging targets that had not yet appeared, cutting angles that no instructor had ever taught, moving through the structure as if she had walked it 1,000 times in her sleep. Jason Walker and the entire squad simply stopped, weapons half raised, staring because there was nothing for them to do. She was doing all of it. She was doing all of it before any of it happened. She's ahead of it. Jason breathed into the radio, and his voice was shaking with something that was not fear and was not admiration, but was both at once. Chief, she's ahead of the scenario. She's clearing rooms before the triggers. Even, how is she doing that? Down at the edge, Ryan Mitchell closed his eyes for just a moment, and something like grief moved across his face, and Daniel Brooks, standing beside him, understood that this man was not proud. He was mourning. He was watching the finest soldier he had ever made come fully alive, and he was mourning her because he knew what it cost, and he knew she was the only one paying it. The scenario had been designed to be impossible. Nobody had ever cleared it clean. It was built to break people, and it had broken plenty of them, and that was the entire point. Megan Carter tore through it like it was made of paper. She found the hostage element in a room that the squad had not even reached yet, secured it, and moved on before the marker had finished registering. She anticipated the second wave and neutralized it from an angle the designers had never imagined anyone finding. She protected her downed soldier, positioning herself between him and every threat without once seeming to think about it. She was not fighting the scenario. She was conducting it, and it was helpless before her. And the whole time her face showed nothing, no triumph, no effort, no fear, just that terrible focused machine, calm, the calm of a person operating so far beyond ordinary human capacity that emotion had simply ceased to be relevant. Jason Walker watched a woman he had mocked for 3 weeks single-handedly complete a scenario that was designed to be uncompletable. And somewhere in the middle of it, the frustration and the disbelief and the fear all burned away, and what was left was something he had never felt for anyone in his life. It was awe. But it was awe with grief inside it because he was starting to understand the way you understand a thing in your gut before your mind catches up. That what he was watching was not a gift. It was a wound. It was the most terrible thing that had ever happened to a person wearing the shape of the most magnificent thing he had ever seen. The final objective marker cleared. The timer stopped, and a score appeared on the board outside a number so far beyond anything the center had ever recorded that the instructor operating the display actually stepped back from it as if it might be a malfunction. Silence fell over the entire compound. Complete, total silence. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The recruits in the observation area stared at the board and then at the entrance to the scenario, waiting for the woman who had just done the impossible to walk out. But Megan Carter did not walk out. Inside the structure in the final room, she stood over the last neutralized threat with her weapon still up, and she did not lower it. The scenario was over. The timer had stopped. Every marker had cleared. There was nothing left to fight, and she did not lower her weapon. "Captain," Jason said carefully from across the room, remembering her warning, keeping his distance, keeping his hands visible. "Captain, it's over. We're clear. You did it. It's over." She didn't respond. Her breathing was still slow and steady. Her eyes were still scanning, still finding threats in a room that had none left, still operating in a world that no longer existed. And Jason understood with a lurch of pure dread that this was exactly what she had warned him about. She had gone somewhere, and she had not come back. Outside, Daniel Brooks saw it on the monitors, and he turned to Ryan Mitchell. "She's not standing down. Commander, she's not standing down. The scenario's over, and she's still in it. Why is she still in it?" "Because I opened this door," Ryan said, and his voice was hollow, "and now I have to bring her back through it. And this is the part I could never be sure of." He was already moving and walking fast toward the entrance, and Daniel walked beside him. "The protocol strips everything. Every suppression, every layer she built to stay human. It gives you the operator complete at full capacity, but it doesn't give you the person. The person you have to call back by hand. And she's been under so long, buried herself so deep that I don't know if she can hear me anymore." "Then what do we do?" "You don't do anything." Ryan stopped at the entrance and looked at Daniel, and for the first time the plain uniformed man looked almost afraid. "I'm going to go in there and try to reach a woman who is currently the most dangerous person on this continent and who no longer remembers that any of you are on her side. If I fail, Master Chief, you get every single soul off this property, and you do not let anyone follow me in. Do you understand?" Daniel understood. He did not want to, but he understood. Ryan Mitchell walked into the structure alone. He moved slowly, hands open and visible, making no sudden motions, the way you approach something wild and wounded and lethal. He found the squad first pressed against the walls of the outer rooms, frozen, and he signaled them silently to get out, and they went, all of them except one. Jason Walker did not leave. "Get out, Lieutenant," Ryan said quietly. "She told me to tell them the truth," Jason said, and his voice was steady even though his hands were not. "If she doesn't come back, she told me, that means she thought this might happen. That means she knew and she went in anyway." He swallowed hard. "I'm not leaving her, sir. Not this time. I left her alone for 3 weeks. I'm not doing it again." Ryan Mitchell looked at the young officer for a long moment, and something in his hard face softened by a fraction. "Then stay behind me. Say nothing. And if she moves toward you, do not run. Running is the one thing that will get you hurt." He turned back toward the final room. "She's still an operator in there. And an operator's instincts don't chase what stands still. They chase what flees." They moved to the doorway of the final room, and there was Megan Carter, weapon up, breathing slow, standing over nothing, guarding a battlefield that only she could still see. Ryan Mitchell stopped in the doorway. He did not raise his hands to her. He did not lower them. He simply stood and let her see him. And when he spoke, his voice was not a commander's voice at all. It was softer than anyone at that center would have believed such a man could produce. "Megan," he said, "it's Ryan. The ops complete. Every objective secured. Your team is clear. You brought them all home." He took one slow breath. You brought them all home, Megan, just like last time. Every one of them lived. Do you hear me? They lived. Something flickered across her face, just a flicker. Her weapon did not lower, but her breathing changed, hitched just slightly. That's it, Ryan said gently. That's it. Come on back now. It's over. You can put it down. You can come back. I'm here. I've got the watch. You can stand down. The flicker came again, stronger. And then terribly something worse than the flicker. Because as the operator began just barely to loosen its grip, the thing underneath it began to surface. And the thing underneath it was not calm at all. The thing underneath it was 2 years of buried grief and a flash and a sound and a decision made half a second too late, all of it rushing up at once as the suppression fell away. Megan Carter's weapon finally lowered, and her face, which had shown nothing at all for the entire scenario, crumpled all at once into the face of a person in unbearable pain. I was too slow, she said. Her voice broke on it. Ryan, I was too slow. The flash I saw it, and I was half a second too slow, and I keep going back, and I'm always too slow. They lived, Megan. Ryan's own voice was thick now. Every one of them lived. You were not too slow. You saved them. You have always saved them. Then why does it feel like this? She whispered. Why does it feel like I lost when everybody came home? Why can't I put it down? Why can't I ever put it down? And she sank to her knees in the middle of that room, the finest soldier the country had ever made. The woman who had just torn through an impossible scenario like it was nothing. And she wept because the door had opened all the way, and everything she had spent 2 years locking in the box had come out with it. Ryan Mitchell crossed the room and knelt down in front of her, and he did not touch her, because you did not touch an operator coming back through the door, but he stayed close enough that she could feel he was there. You put it down by letting people help you carry it, he said quietly. That's the part they never told you. That's the part I never told you, and I should have 2 years ago, and I'm sorry. You were never supposed to carry it alone, Megan. That's not strength. That's just a slower way of losing. He looked at her, and there were tears in the eyes of a man who did not cry. You want to come home. Coming home means you stop carrying it alone. That's the whole secret. That's the only door out. And Jason Walker, standing in the doorway, watching a legend kneel weeping on the floor of a training scenario, understood at last what she had meant on the wall the night before, when she'd said it was about whether the person they needed was someone they could ever let walk back out into the world. She had known. She had always known. Every failed test, every frozen second, every slow, quiet, deliberate mistake had not been weakness at all. It had been a woman holding a door shut with her whole body because she was terrified that if she opened it, she would never be a person again. And she had opened it anyway. Today, for them, for a squad that had mocked her, for a scenario that meant nothing because a man she trusted had asked her to, and because somewhere underneath all that armor, she had never stopped being a soldier who came when she was called. Captain, Jason said, and his voice cracked wide open, and he did not care who heard it. Captain, you came back. You did it. You came back. Megan Carter looked up. Her eyes found Jason in the doorway. And slowly through the tears, through the grief, through 2 years of buried pain, finally seeing the light, something returned to her face that none of them had seen there once in 3 weeks. It was recognition. It was a person looking out at another person and knowing them. Lieutenant, she said, and her voice was raw, but it was hers. It was entirely and completely hers. You didn't run. No, ma'am, Jason said, and he was crying now too openly, and he didn't wipe it away. No, ma'am, I'm done running from you. Ryan Mitchell rose to his feet and let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for 2 years. She was back. The door had opened all the way, and it had nearly kept her, and she had come back through it. He didn't know how. He would never fully know how. But she was kneeling on that floor as Megan Carter, whole present, wrecked, and weeping, and entirely human, and after everything, after all of it, she had come home. Outside on the monitors, Daniel Brooks and Colonel Fielding watched the whole thing, and neither of them said a word because there were no words. They had spent 3 weeks believing they were evaluating a broken soldier, and they had just watched that soldier tear through the impossible and then break down on her knees and then rise back up as a human being, all because a man in a plain uniform had spoken 3 words and then knelt on the floor and refused to let her go. Colonel, Daniel said finally, and his voice was not steady at all, that's the finest soldier I've ever seen in 30 years of doing this. and we were 48 hours from stamping her file and throwing her away. Fielding could not answer. She was looking at the board at the record-breaking score, and then at the monitor at the woman on her knees, and she was thinking about the call she had received, the voice telling her to take no action, and she understood now what it had been protecting. Not a program, not a secret. A person. A person who had been sent into a machine designed to grind her down so that a group of people in a windowless office could decide whether she was still useful or whether she should be quietly disposed of. "We didn't evaluate her, Chief," Fielding said quietly. "We almost executed her, on paper, and we'd never have known the difference." Inside the structure, Ryan Mitchell helped Megan to her feet, and this time she led him and the three of them, the commander, the captain, and the young lieutenant, who had finally stopped running, walked out of the scenario together into the gray morning light. The entire compound was waiting. Every recruit, every instructor, every soul on the property standing in silence, having watched on the monitors what they still could not believe. And as Megan Carter walked out into the light, wrecked and hollow-eyed and more human than she had looked in 2 years, not one of them laughed. Not one of them whispered. Not one of them said a single word about a soldier who couldn't shoot. They stood, all of them, in total silence. And then Ellis, the young private who had never once believed the jokes, brought his hand up in a slow, deliberate salute. And beside him, another soldier did the same. And another. Until the entire assembled compound, every recruit and every instructor stood at silent attention, saluting a woman they had spent 3 weeks writing off as the biggest disappointment the center had ever seen. Megan Carter stopped. She looked at them. And for a moment, for just a moment, the weight she had carried alone for 2 years seemed to lift just slightly, just enough because for the first time since the flash and the sound in the half-second, she was not carrying it alone. Ryan Mitchell leaned close to her and he said quietly, so only she could hear, "Welcome home, Captain." But even as the salutes went up, even as the silence held, Daniel Brooks felt the knot in his stomach return because he was a man who understood how the hidden world worked, and he knew a hard truth that none of the saluting recruits had thought about yet. The people who had sent Megan here to be evaluated were still out there. The voice on the phone was still out there, and they had just watched on those same monitors the exact demonstration they had been waiting 2 years to see. They now knew beyond any doubt that the weapon they had made still worked. Perfectly. Completely. And a weapon that works perfectly is not a weapon anyone in that hidden world is eager to let walk quietly back into an ordinary life. Daniel looked at the black SUV in the east lot and then at Ryan Mitchell, and he saw that the commander was thinking the very same thing, because Ryan's eyes had already left Megan and gone hard and watchful, scanning the tree line, the gate, the horizon, the way a man scans for the next threat before the current one has even finished. The salutes held. The silence held. Megan Carter stood in the gray light home at last, whole at last, surrounded for the first time by people who finally understood what she was. And somewhere in a windowless office 300 miles away, a phone was already ringing, and a voice with no name was already asking the only question that mattered to the people who had built her. "Now that we know she still works," the voice said, "what exactly are we supposed to do with her?" The phone in the windowless office was answered on the second ring by a woman who had no name that anyone at the center would ever learn, and she listened for a long time before she said a single word. "You watch the feed," she said finally. It was not a question. On the other end, a man's voice, careful and flat. "I watched the feed." She cleared it. Not just cleared it, she rewrote it. The score doesn't have a comparison point. There's nothing to compare it to. So the protocol still functions. The protocol functions perfectly, which is the problem. A pause. Mitchell activated it without authorization. He had no clearance to speak those words. He knew that, and he did it anyway in front of 40 witnesses and a live evaluation board. The woman was quiet for a moment. "Then Commander Mitchell has made our decision considerably simpler," she said. "We now have 2 assets to account for instead of 1. The weapon that works and the man who proved he'll break every rule we have to protect it." She set down her pen. "Send someone to Colorado, quietly. I want eyes on both of them by nightfall, and I want options on my desk by morning." The line went dead, and 300 miles away, in the gray light of a Colorado morning, Megan Carter had no idea that a clock had just started ticking on the rest of her life. For the moment, though, she was simply standing in the light, surrounded by silent salutes, feeling something she had not felt in 2 years, which was the strange and terrifying sensation of being seen. Ryan Mitchell kept his hand near her elbow, not touching, just present, and he leaned in and spoke low. We need to get you inside. You're still coming down off the protocol, and coming down is when it's hardest. Your body wants to keep scanning. Your mind wants to keep fighting. You have to let it settle, and you can't do that out here in front of everyone. I'm all right, Megan said, though her hands were trembling faintly at her sides. You're not all right, Ryan said gently. You just opened a door you've kept shut for 2 years, and you walked back through it, and almost nobody does that. You are the furthest thing from all right, Captain, and that's exactly why we're getting you inside. Colonel Fielding crossed the distance to them, and to her credit, she did not fumble. She looked Megan in the eye and she said, Captain Carter, there's a medical team standing by, and there's a private room, and there's coffee that isn't terrible. Whatever you need, whatever you want, you have it. She paused, and something in her professional composure cracked just slightly. And I owe you an apology that I don't have the words for yet, but I will find them. You didn't know, Colonel, Megan said quietly. That's the part I can't stop thinking about, Fielding said. That I didn't know, that I ran an evaluation on a soldier and never once asked whether the evaluation itself was the wrong instrument. She shook her head. Go inside, Captain. That's not an order. That's just me hoping you will. Megan went inside, and the moment the door closed behind her and Ryan in a single medic, the compound outside erupted not in noise but in the low, urgent hum of 40 people trying to process something that had rearranged their entire understanding of what strength looked like. Jason Walker stood in the middle of it, and Ellis found him there. You went in, Ellis said. When everyone came out, you stayed. I saw it on the monitor. Everybody came out, and you stayed in there with her and that commander. She told me not to run, Jason said. He was staring at the door she'd disappeared through. The night before, she said, if I change out there, don't run, get your people clear and let me work. And then she said, tell them the truth that I was a soldier, not a weapon. His voice was unsteady. She knew Ellis. She knew this might take her and she wouldn't come back. And she said all that to me like she was leaving instructions. And I spent 3 weeks calling her a fraud. Ellis didn't know what to say. There was nothing to say. I want to be clear about something. Jason went on, and now he turned and looked at the younger man, and his eyes were hard with a new resolve. The jokes stop, all of them. Anybody in this unit opens their mouth about Captain Carter, about the scores, about any of it, they come through me first. I mean it. I don't care who they are. He swallowed. I spent 3 weeks throwing rocks at somebody who was holding a door shut so we wouldn't get hurt. I'm not letting anybody else do it. Not on my watch. Ellis nodded slowly. Yes, sir. Inside the private room, Megan sat on the edge of a cot while the medic checked her vitals, and Ryan Mitchell stood by the door watching her, the way he'd watched her all morning with that mixture of pride and grief that never quite left his face. Your heart rate's still elevated, the medic said, but it's coming down. Blood pressure's high, but trending the right way. Honestly, Captain, given what I just watched you do, your numbers are almost impossibly stable. I don't have a frame of reference for any of this. You wouldn't, Ryan said. There isn't one. You can step out. I've got her. The medic looked uncertain, glanced at Megan, who gave a small nod, and then left, closing the door softly. And then it was just the two of them for the first time in 2 years. Megan looked at her old commander for a long moment. You weren't supposed to do that, she said quietly. The protocol. You had no authorization. I know how that works, Ryan. You just ended your career. Maybe worse. I know exactly what I just did. Then why? Ryan crossed the room and sat down heavily in the only chair, and for a moment he looked every one of his years. Because they were going to throw you away, he said. I've been fighting it for months up the chain through every channel I had left, and I lost every argument. They'd already decided. The evaluation was a formality, Megan. It was theater. They put you here under the loudest young hotshot they could find in a program built to break people, and they were going to let you fail. Quietly, and then stamp your file and make you disappear. And the worst part, the part that kept me up at night, was that they were going to call it mercy. They were going to tell themselves they were letting a broken soldier rest. Megan's jaw tightened. So you blew it all up. I put the truth on a table where 40 people could see it, Ryan said, because once they'd seen it, they couldn't unsee it. You can hide a paper evaluation. You can bury a file. You can't unring a bell that 40 witnesses heard at the same time. He leaned forward. I made you visible, Megan. That was the whole play. A hidden asset can be disappeared. A visible one is a lot harder to make vanish. Megan was quiet for a long moment, absorbing that. Then something in her face shifted, and it was not gratitude, it was alarm. Ryan, she said slowly, if your play was to make me visible so they couldn't disappear me quietly. She stopped. Then you've also just proven to them that the weapon still works. Perfectly. In front of witnesses. You didn't just save me from being thrown away. You showed the exact people who own me that I'm still fully operational. Ryan Mitchell's face didn't change, but something behind his eyes went very still, and Megan knew him well enough to read it. You already thought of that, she said. I already thought of that. And it was the only card I had, Ryan said quietly. Let them disappear you as broken or make you too valuable and too visible to disappear. Those were the two doors, Megan. I picked the one that at least kept you breathing. I won't pretend it doesn't come with its own price. What price? Ryan looked at her, and for once, he did not soften the truth because he had never once lied to her, and he wasn't going to start now. The price is that the people who own you now know for certain that they own something that works. And people like that don't let something that works retire to a porch in a rocking chair. They find uses for it. He held her eyes. I bought you your life, Megan. I'm not sure yet what it's going to cost to buy you your freedom. That's a different bill, and it hasn't come due yet. Megan sat with that in silence. 2 years of trying to become an ordinary person, of holding the box shut of failing tests on purpose so she could be small enough to slip back into a normal life. And all of it had just been rendered pointless in 3 seconds, because now they knew. So there's no going home, she said. It wasn't a question either. I didn't say that. Ryan leaned forward. I said the bill hasn't come due. There's a difference. We have a window, Megan. Right now, this morning, you are a hero. 40 people saluted you. A criminal apologized to you. That story is going to move up the chain, through the base, maybe further. And a hero is a very inconvenient thing to make disappear. He allowed himself the smallest, grimmest smile. I've spent 30 years learning how these people think. And the one thing they hate more than an asset they can't control is a story they can't contain. So we're going to give them a story they can't contain. That's how we buy the second thing. That's how we buy you home for real. Before Megan could answer, there was a knock at the door. It was Daniel Brooks. He stepped in and he stood there for a moment, this weathered old Master Chief who had watched her fail for 3 weeks and then watched her do the impossible, and he didn't know quite how to begin. Captain, he said finally, I'm the man who wouldn't sign your evaluation. I want you to know that. When Command wanted a recommendation, I kept asking for more time. I couldn't tell you why. I just knew the numbers were lying to me. He paused. I watched you clear that house in the dark 3 nights ago, through a window. I never said anything. I should have. But I want you to know that at least one person here never believed you were broken. Megan looked at him for a long moment. You made a call, she said, 4 days ago, an old number. Daniel went very still. How do you... Because I know who you called, Megan said quietly. There's only a handful of numbers in the world that get that particular kind of answer. Stop testing her. You don't know what you're doing. She almost smiled. I've said those exact words myself to someone once, about someone else. Daniel looked from Megan to Ryan and back again, and the weight of what he'd stumbled into settled fully onto his shoulders. What did I walk into, Captain? Something you were never supposed to see the edges of, Master Chief, Ryan said. And I'm sorry for that, but since you have seen the edges, I'm going to ask you to do something. I'm going to ask you to help us. Help you do what? Make sure the story doesn't die quietly in a file, Ryan said. You've got 30 years of credibility on this base. When you say something happened, people believe it happened. I need that. I need this to be a thing that was witnessed, documented, and remembered by someone the institution trusts. Because there are people who would very much like this morning to be forgotten, and the best way to stop that is to make sure too many reliable people remember it too clearly. Daniel Brooks looked at the commander for a long moment, and he was old enough and wise enough to understand that he was being asked to take a side in something far above his rank, something with real consequences. Is she in danger? He asked simply. Ryan didn't insult him with a lie, but director. Yes. From who? From the people who made her, Ryan said. The same people who might decide that a weapon that works perfectly and a commander who broke the rules to protect it are two problems best solved together. Daniel absorbed that. Then he looked at Megan, this soldier who had pulled Jason Walker out of a simulated ambush without a thought, who had wept on her knees over a 2-year-old wound, who had carried a battle inside her own mind every single day without a word of complaint. 30 years, Daniel said slowly. 30 years I've been telling recruits that we don't leave people behind, that it's the one thing that separates us from everybody else. He straightened. I'll be damned if I'm going to find out at the end of it that we only meant it on the battlefield. He looked at Ryan. Tell me what you need, Commander. All of it. And that was the moment the alliance formed. Not with a speech, not with a plan, but with an old Master Chief deciding that a principle he'd repeated 10,000 times was going to mean something when it finally cost him. By noon, the story had already begun to move exactly as Ryan predicted. It moved the way true things move through a place full of soldiers, which is fast and quietly and with total conviction. By the time the mess hall filled for the midday meal, every soul on the base knew that Captain Megan Carter had cleared the impossible scenario that a mysterious Navy commander had spoken 3 words and transformed her, and that she had broken down afterward in a way that had nothing to do with weakness and everything to do with a wound none of them had known she carried. And a strange thing happened. The story did not make her frightening to them. It made her theirs, because every one of them, every single soldier in that mess hall understood something in their bones about carrying a weight in silence, about being judged for a bad day, about the terror of being seen as less than you were. Megan Carter's story was not a story about a superhuman weapon. It was a story about a person who had been suffering right in front of them and had held it together alone and had been mocked for it and had saved them anyway. That was a story soldiers would die to protect. Ryan had known that. It was the whole reason he'd done it in the open. At 1 o'clock, a car came through the gate that did not belong. The security chief flagged it immediately because it was the second unregistered vehicle in 12 hours, and because the 2 men inside carried credentials that once again locked up his terminal when he tried to verify them. He called Colonel Fielding. Fielding called Ryan Mitchell. They're here, she said simply. 2 of them. Same kind of clearance as your SUV. Whatever came for Carter this morning and its friends just arrived. Ryan closed his eyes for half a second. Where are they now? Requesting a meeting with me regarding, and I'm quoting the exact language on the request, an administrative matter concerning Captain Carter's disposition. Fielding's voice was tight. Disposition, commander, that's the word they used. Like she's a piece of equipment. That's exactly what they think she is, Ryan said. Colonel, listen to me carefully. Take the meeting, be perfectly polite, and do not agree to anything, do not sign anything, and do not let Captain Carter anywhere near that room. Every hour we delay is an hour the story spreads further, and the further it spreads, the harder it gets for them to do anything at all. He hung up and turned to Megan, who had heard every word. They came fast, she said. They came exactly as fast as I expected, Ryan said. Which means we're on schedule, even if the schedule is terrifying. He looked at her. Megan, I need to ask you something, and I need the honest answer, not the soldier's answer. Do you want out? Not out of danger, out of all of it. The program, the protocol, the life. If I told you there was a door and walking through it meant you never got called on again, never activated again, never used again, would you take it? Megan was quiet for a long time, and when she answered, it was not what Ryan expected. 2 years ago, I'd have said yes without breathing, she said slowly. I wanted out so badly I could taste it. That's why I've been failing every test on purpose. That's why I buried myself so deep. I thought if I could just be small enough, slow enough, ordinary enough, they'd let me go, and I could be a person again. She looked down at her own hands. But this morning when you said the words and it all came out and I was clearing that scenario, Ryan, I felt something I haven't felt in 2 years. I felt like myself, not the weapon, myself, the part of me that's good at this, that was born for this, that I've been strangling to death for 2 years because I was so ashamed of it. She looked up at him. I don't want out, she said. I want to stop carrying it alone. Those aren't the same thing. I spent 2 years thinking they were. You said it yourself on the floor in there. Coming home doesn't mean putting it down forever. It means not having to hold it by yourself. Her voice steadied. I don't want to disappear into a porch in a rocking chair. I want to do the thing I'm good at with people I trust without it eating me alive. That's the door I want. Does that door exist? Ryan Mitchell looked at her, and for the first time all day, something like real hope crossed his weathered face. It doesn't exist yet, he said, but I think we might be able to build it. Together. Right here. Starting today. He stood, because I think you just described something this army desperately needs and doesn't have. Someone who's been all the way to the bottom and come back teaching the ones who are going to go down there next. Not how to be a weapon, how to survive being one, how to come home. He looked at her hard. There is no one else alive who could teach that, Megan. No one. And it might just be the one thing valuable enough to be worth more to them than making you disappear. At 2 o'clock, Colonel Fielding took the meeting. The two men who sat across from her were polite, precise, and utterly without warmth. They did not raise their voices. They did not make threats. They simply laid out in calm administrative language a series of facts that amounted to a noose. Captain Carter, they explained, was the subject of a classified program whose oversight fell outside the normal chain of command. This morning's events, while impressive, had occurred without authorization. Commander Mitchell had activated a restricted protocol he had no clearance to invoke. And it would be best for everyone, they suggested, if Captain Carter were quietly transferred into their custody for further evaluation, and if this morning's unfortunate breach of protocol were handled discreetly internally without any further discussion. Fielding listened to all of it, and then she did something they did not expect. I appreciate the briefing, she said pleasantly. I really do, but I'm afraid there's a complication. She folded her hands on her desk. You see, 43 people witnessed this morning's evaluation. My entire training cadre, 2 full recruit classes, and my senior instructor staff. Master Chief Daniel Brooks has already filed a formal after-action report per standard procedure documenting a record-breaking evaluation result. That report is now part of the permanent training record of this facility. It's been logged, it's been distributed, it exists in a dozen places. She smiled without any warmth of her own. So when you say you'd like to handle this discreetly, gentlemen, I have to be honest with you, that ship has sailed. This is now a documented, witness-celebrated event involving a decorated officer. And if a decorated officer who just set an institutional record were to suddenly vanish into an unnamed program the very same afternoon, well, she spread her hands. People would ask questions, reports would get written, and I don't think discretion is really on the menu anymore. Do you? The two men were silent for a long moment. Fielding had, with a few sentences, turned their greatest tool secrecy into a wall they now had to climb. You've involved a great many people in something that was meant to stay small, Colonel, one of them said finally, and there was a coldness in it now. No, Fielding said. Commander Mitchell did that. I just made sure it was written down. She stood, signaling the meeting was over. You're welcome to speak with your superiors. I'm sure we can find an arrangement that respects both your program's interests and, I don't know, the basic decency of not disappearing a war hero the day after she becomes one. My door is open, but my signature isn't available. Not for this, not today. The two men left, and Colonel Ann Fielding sat back down in her chair and let out a long, shaking breath because she had just picked a fight with people she couldn't see on behalf of a soldier she'd almost thrown away, and she had no idea whether she'd just saved Megan Carter or painted a target on her own back. She picked up the phone and called Ryan Mitchell. It's done, she said. I stalled them. I made the story the wall. They didn't like it. They weren't supposed to like it, Ryan said. You did exactly right, Colonel. You just bought us the most valuable thing there is. Which is time, Ryan said, and a fight in the open instead of a knife in the dark. That's the whole game. They win in the shadows. They lose in the light. You just drag the whole thing into the light. He paused. You may have ended your own career doing it. You understand that. Chief Brooks said almost the same thing this morning, Fielding said quietly. You know what I told myself? I told myself I've spent 26 years signing papers that move people around like furniture. Maybe it's about time I refuse to sign one. She let out a breath. If it costs me, it costs me. Some things you don't put a career ahead of. By late afternoon, word of the meeting had rippled through the senior staff, and something remarkable had begun to happen across the base. It was not organized. Nobody called for it. But soldier by soldier, instructor by instructor, a quiet consensus was forming, hardening, becoming something with weight. Captain Carter was theirs now. She had bled in front of them, metaphorically and almost literally, and they had saluted her. And now word was spreading that men in unmarked cars wanted to take her away in the night. And the entire base, without anyone saying it out loud, had decided that this was not going to happen quietly. Jason Walker put it into words that evening, standing in the barracks in front of a room full of soldiers who 3 weeks ago had laughed at Megan Carter and now would not hear a word against her. "I want to say something," he said, "and then I never want to talk about it again. So listen close." The room went quiet. 3 weeks ago, I stood right here and told all of you she didn't belong, that somebody was protecting her, that combat wasn't a place for people who hesitate. He looked around the room and his shame was plain on his face and he did not hide from it. I was wrong in every way a person can be wrong. And the worst part isn't that I was wrong about her skill, it's that I was wrong about her heart. She was suffering, right in front of us, every day. And instead of asking what was wrong, I made it a joke. He swallowed hard. She saved my life, and she did it after 3 weeks of me tearing her down. She pulled me out of that ambush without a half second of hesitation for a guy who didn't deserve it. The room was silent. "There are men in cars on this base tonight who want to take her away," Jason went on, and his voice hardened. "Quietly, like she's a piece of equipment. And I know we're just recruits and instructors, and we don't have the clearance to know what any of this is really about. But I know one thing." He looked around the room. "We don't leave people behind. That's not a slogan we say and forget. It's the whole thing. It's the only thing. And if it doesn't mean something tonight, when it's actually inconvenient, then it never meant anything at all." He straightened. "So I don't know what's coming, but whatever it is, Captain Carter is not disappearing off this base while I'm standing on it. Anybody who feels different, the door's right there. Anybody who feels the same, then we're agreed and we don't need to say another word about it." Nobody moved toward the door. And in that silence, a strange and powerful thing had happened. Something the people in the windowless office 300 miles away had never accounted for. They had built their entire strategy on secrecy, on the assumption that assets and problems could be moved around in the dark, unseen and unmourned. And in the space of a single day, a commander who broke the rules, a colonel who refused to sign a master chief who wouldn't forget, and a young lieutenant who finally understood, had turned Megan Carter into the one thing their kind of power could never overcome. They had turned her into someone people would fight for in the open. At 9 that evening, Ryan Mitchell stood with Megan at the window of the private room looking out at the dark base, and he told her everything. The meeting, fielding stand, the 2 men and their administrative language, the quiet consensus forming across the base. "They came to make you disappear," he said. "And instead they walked into a base full of people who've already decided you're one of them. Fielding turned the story into a wall. The soldiers turned it into a shield. Brooks put it in writing. And you, Megan, you turned it into something they never expected." "What's that?" "A person," Ryan said simply. "Not an asset, not a weapon, not a disposition. A person that 43 people watch suffer and triumph and break down and get back up. You can disappear a weapon. You cannot disappear a person that many people love. It's the one thing that stops them cold, and it's the one thing they can never manufacture. And you did it just by being honest for 3 seconds on your knees on a training room floor." Megan looked out at the dark at the base full of people who had decided to stand between her and the shadows, and for the first time in 2 years, she felt the weight on her chest ease, not because it was gone, but because she could finally feel all the hands that had reached under it to help her carry it. "It's not over, is it?" she said quietly. "They'll come back, different angle, different pressure. People like that don't lose the thing they want. They just wait." "No," Ryan agreed. "It's not over. They'll come back. And when they do, we have to be ready with something better than a wall. We have to give them a reason to want you here more than they want you gone. We have to build the door you described, the one that lets you do what you're good at without it eating you alive." He turned to her. "And I think it starts tomorrow. I think it starts with you standing up in front of that base and becoming the thing only you can be. Not the weapon they made. The teacher who came back from where they were all afraid to go." Megan was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the lights of the base at the barracks, where a young lieutenant had just staked everything on a principal at the office, where a colonel had refused to sign her away, at the dark beyond the gate, where men in unmarked cars were even now reporting her failure to disappear. "All right," she said finally, and there was steel in it now, the good kind, the kind that came not from a protocol, but from a decision freely made. Then we build the door. And if they come back, they don't find a weapon they can requisition or a hero they can quietly retire. She turned from the window and her eyes were clear and present and entirely her own. They find a teacher this army can't afford to lose standing in the middle of a base full of people who won't let her go. Ryan Mitchell smiled, tired and proud and not yet safe, but for the first time in 2 years, genuinely hopeful. Then we've got work to do, Captain, he said. It's starting at first light. And out past the gate in the dark, a phone rang once more in a car that didn't belong, and a cold voice delivered a message that would change the shape of everything still to come. The direct approach has failed, the voice said. She's too visible now, too loved. So we stop trying to take her. Instead, we give her a mission, one only she can accept. And we make absolutely certain that this time when she goes through that door, she does not come back. The mission arrived at 6 the next morning, and it arrived not as a threat, but as an honor, which is exactly what made it so dangerous. It came through the front door, through official channels with real signatures and real clearances. And that was the first thing that told Ryan Mitchell they had changed their entire strategy overnight. The men in unmarked cars were gone. In their place was a single envelope, hand-delivered to Colonel Fielding's office by a courier with legitimate credentials containing orders so clean and so proper that they could have been framed and hung on a wall. Fielding read them twice before she called Ryan. "You need to come to my office," she said, "right now. And you need to come alone before Carter sees this." Ryan was there in 4 minutes. He read the order standing up, and Fielding watched his face, and she saw something she had not expected to see on the hard-weathered features of a man who had faced down 2 agents the day before without flinching. She saw fear. "They're good," Ryan said quietly, setting the pages down. "God help me, they're good. This is the smartest thing they could possibly have done, and I walked them right into it. I made her too visible to take, so they're not going to take her." He looked up. "They're going to send her, and they're going to make it look like the greatest honor of her career." The orders were for a mission, a real one, a rescue operation overseas in a place with no name involving hostages whose situation was genuinely desperate and genuinely time-sensitive. And the order specified in clean official language that the operation required an operator of Phoenix unit capability and that Captain Megan Carter was being formally requested by name to lead it. "It's real," Fielding said. "I checked what I could check. There really are hostages. There really is a crisis. This isn't manufactured. That's what makes it so." "That's what makes it perfect," Ryan finished. "They didn't invent a trap. They found a real one and pointed her at it. A real mission she'll never refuse because refusing means real people die, and she is constitutionally incapable of letting real people die when she could have saved them. They know that about her. They've always known that about her. It's the exact wound she's been carrying for 2 years. His jaw tightened. The flash, the sound, the half-second too late. They're using her own guilt as the leash. They're offering her the one thing she can't say no to, which is the chance to not be too slow this time. Fielding felt cold. "And if she goes?" "If she goes," Ryan said slowly, "she goes back through the door. The real door, not a training scenario. Full activation, live operation, exactly the environment where the protocol was designed to keep her permanently. And this time there's no me at the doorway to call her back. This time she's 10,000 miles away in a war alone." He looked at Fielding. "The protocol strips away everything that makes her a person and gives you the pure operator. In a training scenario, coming back was already almost impossible. In a real operation under real fire, staying under long enough to complete the mission." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. "You think they expect her not to come back?" "I think they're counting on it," Ryan said. "One clean operation. She saves the hostages, which solves a real problem they genuinely have. And she doesn't come home, which solves the problem of what to do with a weapon that's become too loved to disappear. 2 birds, one perfectly legal, perfectly honorable, perfectly deniable stone. If she dies over there or if she goes under and never surfaces, it's not a disappearance. It's a hero's death. They'll give her a folded flag and a wall with her name on it, and everyone will cry, and nobody will ever ask a single question." He shook his head. "They turned my own move against me. I made her a hero, so they'll let her die a hero's death. It's the only exit that gives them everything they want." The 2 of them stood in that office in silence. And the trap was so elegant, so clean, so wrapped in genuine honor and genuine need that neither of them could immediately see a way out of it. "We can't tell her not to go," Fielding said finally. "Can we? There really are hostages." "No," Ryan said quietly. "We can't tell her not to go. That's the genius of it. If we try to stop her from saving real people, we become the villains. We become the ones who put her safety ahead of innocent lives. And she'd never forgive us, and worse, she'd be right not to." He rubbed his face with both hands. "They didn't just build a trap, Colonel. They built one where every exit makes us the bad guy. Stop her, and we're monsters who let hostages die. Let her go, and we send her to the one place designed to keep her forever." At 7, they told Megan. She read the orders in the private room with Ryan and Fielding and Daniel Brooks standing around her and Jason Walker in the doorway. And she read them slowly, and when she finished, she set them down and was quiet for a long time. "How many hostages?" she said finally. 9, Fielding said. "Aid workers. 3 of them are medical. They've been held for 11 days. The window's closing." 11 days, Megan repeated softly. "In that region, 11 days is the outer edge. After 11 days, the calculus changes for the people holding them. They start deciding the hostages are worth more as a message than as leverage." She looked up. "You know what happens on day 12 or 13 in that part of the world?" Nobody answered. They all knew. "So there's maybe a 2-day window," Megan said. "Maybe less. And they need someone who can go in fast alone or nearly alone into a hardened position and get 9 people out before that window closes." She looked around the room. "And they asked for me by name." "Megan," Ryan said carefully, "I need to tell you something about these orders, and I need you to hear all of it before you decide anything." "You don't have to," Megan said quietly. "I already know." The room went still. "You think I can't read a trap, Ryan?" She almost smiled, and there was no humor in it, only a deep and weary understanding. "I've been reading traps my whole career. This is the cleanest one I've ever seen. It's beautiful, honestly. They point me at a real crisis, real people, real dying, and they know I can't say no. And they know that going means full activation, leave operation, no doorway, no you. They're betting I go under and don't come up." She looked at Ryan. "That's the play, isn't it? Save the hostages, lose myself. A hero's death instead of a disappearance. Clean, legal, deniable." Ryan Mitchell looked at his finest operator, and he felt a wave of something that was pride and grief in equal measure because, of course, she'd seen it. Of course she had. She'd seen it faster than he had. "Yes," he said, "that's the play." "So it's a choice between 9 real people and me," Megan said. "That's what they've built. 9 lives on one side and my life on the other, and they've made it so that the only way to save the 9 is to lose the 1. She was quiet for a moment. "It's actually a fair trade when you look at it that way. 9 for 1. Any soldier would take that trade. I've taken worse." "No." The word came from the doorway, and it was Jason Walker, and it came out sharp and immediate, and before he'd even decided to say it, every head turned. "No, ma'am, that's not the only 2 choices. It's a false choice. They want you to think it's 9, or you, because if you believe that, you'll walk right into it. But that's not the actual math." Megan looked at him. "Explain, Lieutenant." Jason stepped into the room, and he was afraid anyone could see. He was afraid, but he pushed through it. "The whole trap works because you go in alone, or nearly alone. Full activation, no support, nobody at the doorway to call you back. That's the part that kills you. Not the mission, the isolation." He looked around the room. "But what if you don't go alone? What if you go in with a team that knows exactly what you are, that knows about the protocol, that knows about the doorway? What if someone goes with you whose entire job, the only job, is to be your way back? Then it's not 9 or you anymore. Then it's 9 and you. Then the trap breaks because the thing they're counting on you going under alone never happens." There was a silence in the room, and it was the silence of several very experienced people realizing that a young lieutenant had just seen something they'd all missed. "He's right," Daniel Brooks said slowly. "Commander, he's right. The trap isn't the mission. The trap is the solitude. They didn't request a team. They requested her by name alone because a team ruins the whole thing. A team means witnesses. A team means someone to bring her back. A team means if she goes under, someone's there at the doorway." He looked at Ryan. The orders say they need Phoenix capability. They don't say she has to go by herself. That's the gap. That's the crack in it. Ryan Mitchell was very still, and then slowly something changed in his face, and it was the look of a man who has just found the one loose thread in a perfect knot. The doorway, he said quietly. In the scenario, I was the doorway. I spoke the words to send her under, and I spoke to bring her back. That's how the protocol was designed. It always needs a doorway, an anchor, a voice she trusts positioned to call her home. He looked at Megan. They're sending you without one. That's the mechanism of the trap, not the danger, the absence of an anchor. He turned to the room. But if we send an anchor with you, if the team includes someone whose entire purpose is to hold the doorway open, then I can go under as deep as the mission needs, Megan said slowly, understanding blooming, and still have a way back. Because someone's there. Someone's holding the door. It has to be someone you trust completely, Ryan said. The anchor only works if the operator's deepest instincts recognize the voice is safe. That's not something you can fake or assign. It has to be real. It has to be someone your gut knows at a level below thought will not let you fall. And the room went quiet again because everyone understood what that meant. There were only so many people in the world Megan Carter trusted at that level. And one of them had a career and a family and decades of service, and one of them was standing in the doorway, having just staked everything on her twice in 2 days. It's me, Ryan said. Obviously, it's me. I built the protocol. I'm the original doorway. I go with her. No, Megan said quietly. It can't be you. Ryan blinked. Megan. Think about it, she said. If you come with me, you're removed from the board. The people who set this up want you gone almost as much as they want me gone. You broke their rules. You made me visible. If you get on that aircraft, you're doing exactly what they want, taking yourself out of the fight 10,000 miles from anyone who could protect either of us. She shook her head. You have to stay here. You're the only one who can keep fighting this in the light while I'm gone. You're the story. You're the wall. If you disappear onto an operation, the whole thing they can't contain suddenly becomes very containable. 2 heroes lost on the same mission. They'd love that even more than losing one. Ryan opened his mouth to argue and then closed it because she was right, and he hated that she was right. Then who, he said, who holds the doorway? It has to be someone your instincts trust completely at the deepest level, and Megan, that list is very, very short. The room was silent, and then Jason Walker spoke very quietly. She trusts me. Everyone looked at him. I know how that sounds, Jason said. I know. 3 weeks ago, I was tearing her apart. I'm the last person who should be able to say that. But it's true, and I think she knows it's true. He looked at Megan. In the scenario, when you came back, when the commander was trying to reach you and you were still standing over nothing. He was talking to you and you weren't hearing him. And then you looked up, and it wasn't his voice that pulled you the rest of the way. It was mine. When I said you came back, you did it. You looked at me. You said you didn't run. He swallowed. Something in you decided I was safe. I don't know why. God knows I didn't earn it. But it happened. You know it happened. Megan Carter looked at the young lieutenant for a long, long moment, and the room held its breath because she was the only one who could confirm or deny it, and everything now hinged on her answer. It happened, she said finally softly. You're right. It happened. She studied him. But Jason, you don't understand what you're volunteering for. Holding the doorway isn't standing on a mission and looking brave. If I go under all the way under on a live operation and it starts to keep me, the only thing between me and being gone forever is the person holding the door. And that person has to be willing to walk right up to the most dangerous thing on that battlefield, which will be me, and call me back knowing that if it doesn't work, I might not recognize them as anything but a threat. Her voice was gentle but absolute. People have died being the doorway, Jason. The anchor is the most dangerous job on the whole operation, more dangerous than mine, because I'll be operating on pure instinct and you'll be standing in front of me on purpose, unarmed to my instincts, asking me to remember I'm human. The room was silent. I know, Jason said. His voice shook, but it did not break. I understand what I'm asking for, and I'm asking for it anyway. He straightened. You pulled me out of an ambush after 3 weeks of me being the worst version of myself. You didn't hesitate. You didn't stop to decide if I deserved it. You just moved because that's who you are." He looked her dead in the eye. "So this is me moving. This is me not stopping to decide if I deserve to be the one. This is me saying I'm going to be your doorway captain because somebody has to, and because I'd rather die holding that door open than live another day knowing I let you walk into that place alone." Nobody spoke. There was nothing to add. A young man had just offered his life to be the thread that pulled another person back from the edge of herself, and he'd offered it with his eyes wide open, and there was a kind of terrible beauty in it that silenced the entire room. Ryan Mitchell finally broke the quiet. "It could work," he said slowly. "God help me, it could actually work. A small team, Jason as the anchor, a few operators we trust to fill it out. We turn their trap inside out. They send her alone to lose her. We send her with a doorway to bring her home. And when she comes back, hostages rescued and operator recovered. They don't get their clean hero's death. They get the exact opposite. They get living, breathing proof that the thing they built can go all the way down and come all the way back." He looked at Megan, "Which is the one outcome they cannot survive. Because if you come back from this hole, then you've proven the impossible. You've proven a weapon can be a person. And once that's proven, they can never again justify disappearing one." "They'll fight it," Fielding warned. "They requested her alone by name. If we start attaching a team, they'll object. They'll pull strings. They'll try to strip the anchor off the mission before it launches." "Then we don't ask," Ryan said. "The orders say Phoenix capability. They don't forbid a support element. We read the orders exactly as written. We attach a team under standard operational doctrine. And by the time anyone objects, we're already wheels up. You don't ask permission to bring your people home, Colonel. You just bring them home and you make everyone else explain why they wanted them left behind." At 11 that morning, the plan was set, and it was audacious and it was terrifying, and it was the only thing anyone in that room believed could work. But there was one more conversation that had to happen, and Megan knew it, and she asked for the room, everyone except Jason. When it was just the two of them, she looked at the young lieutenant for a long time. "I need to tell you the thing nobody said out loud," she said quietly, "about what you're really signing up for, because you deserve to know the whole truth before that aircraft leaves the ground. Tell me." "2 years ago," Megan said, and her voice was very steady, the steadiness of someone who has decided to say the hardest thing. "There was a mission, a rescue like this one. My team went in and we got everyone out. Every hostage, every operator, everyone came home." She paused. "But there was a moment, a door I was clearing, and I saw a flash and I heard a sound and I knew that there was a threat behind that door. And I hesitated, half a second, because for half a second, the person part of me, the human part, wondered if it might be a child. And in that half second, a teammate took a hit that should have been mine to prevent." Jason was very quiet. "He lived," Megan said. "He's fine. He'll tell you himself it wasn't my fault, that the timing was impossible, that no one could have done better. And he's probably right." Her voice tightened. "But I've spent 2 years unable to forgive myself for that half second, because that half second was the human part of me. The part that hesitated, the part that wondered about a child. And the lesson my mind took from it, the wrong lesson, the poison, was that the human part is the weakness. That if I'd just been the weapon, pure, no hesitation, no wondering, he'd never have been hit." She looked at Jason. "That's why I've been failing every test. That's why I buried myself. I wasn't protecting the world from the weapon. I was punishing the human. I decided the human part of me was the flaw, and I've spent 2 years trying to strangle it because I believed it got someone hurt." Jason understood now. He understood all of it, the whole 2 years, in a single terrible instant. "And now you're going back," he said slowly, "into the exact same kind of mission, the thing that broke you. And here's what you need to understand about being my doorway," Megan said. "When I go under, all the way under, the operator has no hesitation. None. That's what makes it lethal. But it also means the operator would never have wondered about that child. The operator doesn't wonder. And somewhere in me, a broken part is going to want to stay under permanently, because under there, I never have to feel that half second again. Under there, I'm never too slow. Under there, it never hurts." She held his eyes. "So when you call me back, Jason, you're not just calling me back from a battlefield. You're calling me back into the exact pain I've been running from for 2 years. You're asking me to choose the part of myself that hesitates, the part that wonders about the child, the part that got someone hurt. You're asking me to choose to be human again, when being human is the thing I blame for everything. The weight of it settled onto Jason Walker's shoulders, the true weight, the real job. That's why it can't be a stranger, Megan said softly. That's why it can't even be Ryan, not anymore. Because the voice that calls me back has to convince the most wounded part of me that being human is worth the pain. And Ryan's voice is tangled up in the guilt he built the weapon. He's part of the machine I blame. She looked at Jason. But you're the person I saved. You're living proof that the human part of me, the part that moves to save someone, even when they don't deserve it, is the part worth keeping. When you call me back, you're not just a voice. You're the answer to the question that's been killing me. You're proof that the person is worth more than the weapon. Jason Walker's eyes were wet, and he did not care. Then that's what I'll be, he said quietly. When you're all the way down there in the dark and part of you wants to stay because it doesn't hurt down there, I'll be the reason to come back up. I'll be the proof it was worth it. He drew a shaking breath. You saved me when I didn't deserve it, Captain. Let me be the thing that proves saving me was worth it. Let me be the reason the human part wins. Megan Carter looked at the young man who 3 weeks ago had held up her target sheet and laughed, and who now stood before her, offering to be the anchor of her soul, and something in her chest that had been clenched tight for 2 years loosened just slightly, just enough. All right, Lieutenant, she said softly. Then you're my doorway. God help us both. At 1600, the team assembled on the flight line. 4 operators Ryan trusted with his life, handpicked in 5 hours through channels that would raise questions later. Jason Walker, who had never been on a real operation in his life, carrying the most important job on the manifest. And Megan Carter, walking toward the aircraft not as a weapon being deployed, but as a soldier going to war with people who had chosen freely to hold her doorway open. Daniel Brooks caught at her arm before she boarded. Captain, he said, 30 years I've sent people out that door. I've never once sent one I believed in more than you. His weathered face was tight with emotion. You come back. That's an order from a master chief to a captain, which means absolutely nothing. So take it instead as a request from an old man who almost got you wrong and can't live with it if the last thing this place did was fail you. I'll do my best, Chief, Megan said. No, Daniel said, not your best. You come back. Different thing entirely. Ryan Mitchell was the last. He stood in front of her, and there were no words adequate to 2 years of guilt and a lifetime of respect, so he didn't reach for grand ones. I'm the reason you're carrying this, he said quietly. I built the thing that hurt you. I sent you on the mission that broke you, and I've spent 2 years knowing it. He looked at her. Come home, Megan. Not for the army, not to beat these people. Come home so I can spend whatever's left of my career building the door you asked for, the one that lets you be good at this without it eating you alive. I want to build it, but I can't build it without you. So come home. Megan looked at her old commander, and for the first time in 2 years, she forgave him fully in a single glance, and he felt it land in something he'd been carrying almost as long as she had eased. Hold the light on Ryan, she said. I'll follow it home. She boarded the aircraft. Jason Walker climbed in behind her, pale and terrified and absolutely certain, carrying nothing but a voice and a reason. The ramp closed, the engines rose to a scream, and in the windowless office, 300 miles away, a phone rang, and a cold voice received a report that had not been in the plan at all. She's not going alone, the report said. Mitchell attached a support element, and there's an anchor on the manifest. Someone positioned to bring her back. There was a long silence on the line. Then the cold voice said something very quiet and very final, and it was the sound of a trap that had failed rearranging itself into something far more dangerous. Then the operation proceeds as planned, the voice said, but we make certain the anchor does not survive to hold the door. Remove the doorway, and she goes under alone, regardless of who else is on that aircraft. Find out who it is, and make sure that on this mission, the person holding Captain Carter's way home does not come back. The aircraft lifted off the runway and turned east into the darkening sky, carrying a woman going to face the exact wound that had broken her, and a young man who had promised to be her way back. Neither of them knowing that a decision had just been made 10,000 miles behind them to cut that way back before it could ever be used. The aircraft touched down at a forward staging point at 0300 local time. And the first thing Megan Carter did when the ramp lowered was pull Jason Walker aside away from the four operators and look him hard in the eyes. "Something's wrong," she said quietly. Jason blinked. "We just landed. What could be?" "The staging point is too quiet. The support element that was supposed to meet us isn't here. And the intelligence packet they handed me on the aircraft has a gap in it right where the enemy's reinforcement timeline should be." Her eyes were already scanning, already working. "Someone scrubbed the part that tells me how much time I actually have. That's not an oversight, Jason. Somebody took it out on purpose." Jason felt his stomach drop. "You think they're trying to get you killed in there? Rush you, make you go too fast, too deep, so you go all the way under." "I think," Megan said slowly, "that they realized they couldn't stop you from coming. So they changed the plan." She looked at him, and there was a terrible clarity in her face. "Jason, listen to me. Whatever happens on this operation, stay close to me, but stay behind me. If anyone on this operation who isn't one of our four tries to separate us, tries to pull you away from me, tries to send you somewhere on your own, you refuse. You do not leave my side for any reason. Do you understand?" "Why would anyone?" "Because you're the doorway," Megan said. "And the smartest way to make sure I go under alone isn't to keep you off the aircraft. It's to let you come and then make sure you're not there when it matters. Remove the anchor at the moment it's needed, and I go under just as alone as if you'd never come at all." Her jaw tightened. Somebody very smart figured that out. "So from this second until we're both home, you are attached to me. You are my shadow. Anyone tries to change that, you say no. And if they push, you get loud. And if they push harder, you get to me. Clear?" "Clear," Jason said. And the weight of the job just got heavier because now it wasn't only about calling her back. It was about surviving long enough to do it. The four operators Ryan had sent were the real thing, and within an hour, Megan knew she could trust them because she watched how they moved and how they checked their gear and how they positioned themselves, and every instinct she had told her, these were people who would not leave anyone behind. Their team lead was a quiet, gray-eyed senior operator named Cross. And when Megan pulled him aside and told him about the scrubbed intelligence and the missing support element, he didn't argue and he didn't dismiss it. "I noticed the same thing," Cross said. "The reinforcement timelines blanked, and there was supposed to be a local liaison here to hand off the final approach route. He's not here either." He looked at her steadily. "Commander Mitchell told me before we left that my only job above the mission, above everything, is to make sure you and the lieutenant come home together. He said if anyone tries to separate the two of you, I treat it as a hostile act. I didn't understand why. I'm starting to." "You understand now," Megan said quietly. "I understand now." Cross nodded once. "Then here's how it's going to be. My four move as a box around the two of you. You do the work. The lieutenant holds your line, and my people make sure nothing on God's earth gets between you and him. That's the operation. Everything else is secondary." And in that moment, Megan Carter felt the trap begin to break, because the people who had designed it had counted on her being alone, and instead, she was standing in a circle of people who had all been told the same thing by a man who loved her, which was bring her home together. At 0430, they moved on the objective. The hostages were being held in a hardened compound at the edge of a shattered town. 9 of them held 11 days, and the intelligence that remained was clear on one thing, which was that the window had nearly closed. The people holding them had begun to move to reposition, which meant they were preparing either to relocate their captives or to be done with them. There was no more time to plan. There was only time to go. Megan Carter stood at the edge of the objective, and she felt the pull she had been dreading for 2 years. The pull of the door, the invitation to go under, to become the operator, to stop being the woman who hesitated and become the weapon that never did. And this time there was no Ryan Mitchell at a doorway to speak the words. This time she had to open the door herself on purpose, knowing the exact wound waiting on the other side of it. She turned to Jason. "I'm going on under now, not all the way, just enough to do the work. But if it starts to pull me deeper, if you see me going too far, you call me. You know the words that bring me back. Ryan taught you on the aircraft." "Anchor home," Jason said, his voice steady. "That's the phrase. I say your name and then anchor home." "That's the phrase," Megan confirmed. "But Jason, the phrase is just a key. The key doesn't work unless the reason behind it is real. When you say it, you have to mean it. You have to be the proof I told you about. The proof that the human part is worth the pain. She looked at him one last time. Don't just say the words. Be the reason. Can you do that? I've been the reason since the moment you pulled me out of that ambush, Jason said. I just didn't know it yet. Go do the work, Captain. I've got the door. And Megan Carter opened the door and went under. What happened over the next 11 minutes, the four operators would talk about for the rest of their lives in hushed voices to people who would not believe them. Megan moved through the compound the way water moves through a broken dam, finding every gap, every seam, every angle, always a half-second ahead of everything, clearing threats before they resolved into threats. She was not fast. Fast is a word for human speed. She was inevitable. She flowed from the outer wall to the inner rooms without a wasted motion, and behind her in the box formation Cross had built, Jason Walker moved in her wake with the phrase ready on his lips, watching her, always watching her, for the moment she started to go too deep. They reached the hostages at midnight 7, 9 of them exhausted, terrified, but alive. And this was the moment the trap sprung, because as Cross's operators began moving the hostages toward the extraction route, a figure appeared at Jason's shoulder, a man in local security dress with legitimate-looking credentials, one of the liaison personnel who was supposed to have met them at the staging point and hadn't. Lieutenant, the man said low and urgent, the extraction route's compromised. I need you to come with me right now. Secondary route, we have to move separately. The captain will follow the operators. You come with me. And Jason Walker, remembering every word Megan had said, did exactly what she'd told him to do. No, he said. Lieutenant, there's no time. The route is... No, Jason said again louder, and he stepped backward toward Megan, closing the distance, refusing to be moved. I don't go anywhere without the captain. Nowhere, not one step. The man's face changed just slightly, just for an instant, and in that instant, Jason saw the truth of it, saw that this was the whole plan, saw that this man's entire purpose was to peel the doorway away from the operator at the exact moment she was under, and something cold and certain rose in him. Cross, Jason called out, not loud but clear. Hostile at my 6. He's trying to separate me from the captain. And Cross's operators, who had been told that separating those two was to be treated as a hostile act, moved without hesitation. And the man in local security dress found himself looking at 2 weapons and a wall of people who would not let him take one more step toward Jason Walker. But the damage the man had wanted to do, he had already partly done, because in the seconds of confusion and the noise and the movement, Megan Carter had gone deeper. Jason saw it happen. He saw her clear the last threat between the hostages and the extraction route, and then he saw her not stop. He saw her keep moving, keep clearing, keep scanning in a compound that was now empty of threats, exactly the way she had stood over nothing in the training scenario. The operator had done its work. The mission was complete. The hostages were moving to safety. And Megan Carter was not coming back up. She's going under, Cross said sharply. Lieutenant, she's not stopping. That's the thing the commander warned about. She's going all the way down. Jason understood. This was it. This was the moment the entire plan had been built. For the moment 2 years of pain had been leading to the moment that the people in the windowless office had gambled she could not survive. Alone in a real operation with the wound of 2 years pulling her down into the place where it didn't hurt, where she was never too slow, where she never had to be the human who hesitated. Except she was not alone, because Jason Walker was there. He moved toward her, and Cross grabbed his arm. Lieutenant, that's the most dangerous person on this continent right now, and she doesn't know you're on her side. If you walk up on her while she's under... She told me not to run, Jason said, pulling free. She told me the operator chases what flees and ignores what stands still. So I'm not going to run. I'm going to walk right up to her and stand still and be the reason. He looked at Cross. That's the whole job. That's why I'm here. Let me do it. And Jason Walker walked slowly, hands open and visible, into the space in front of Megan Carter, the finest and most dangerous soldier alive who was operating on pure instinct in a room full of shadows, and he stopped and he stood still and he did not run. Megan, he said. His voice shook and then it steadied because he found the reason underneath the words. Megan Carter, it's Jason, the op's complete. All 9 hostages are out. You did it. You brought every one of them home. He took one slow breath. Every one of them lived Megan, just like last time. Nobody was too slow. You were not too slow. Her weapon did not lower. Her eyes scanned past him, through him, finding threats that weren't there. "I know you can hear me," Jason said. And now the real thing began to come out of him, the thing that made him and only him able to do this. "I know part of you wants to stay down there because down there it doesn't hurt. Down there you never have to feel that half second again. Down there you're never the human who hesitated." His voice cracked. "But I need you to listen to me, Captain, because I'm about to tell you the truth about that half second, and I'm the only person alive who can tell you this and have it mean anything." Megan's breathing changed just slightly, a flicker. "2 years ago, you hesitated for half a second because the human part of you wondered if there was a child behind that door," Jason said. "And you've spent 2 years believing that half second was your weakness, that the human part is the flaw, that if you'd just been the weapon, nobody would have gotten hurt." He stepped one pace closer, unarmed, against her instincts, betting his life on a principle. "But 3 weeks ago on a training range, the human part of you saw a man who'd spent 3 weeks tearing you down, a man who deserved nothing from you, about to die in an ambush. And that same human part, the part that hesitates, the part that wonders, the part you've been trying to kill for 2 years, that part moved. It moved to save me, not the weapon. The weapon would have let me die because I didn't matter to the mission. The human saved me, the human that you hate, the human you think is the flaw." Tears were streaming down Jason's face now, and he did not stop. "I'm alive because of the exact part of you that you went down there to escape," he said. "I'm standing here breathing it because of your half second, because of your hesitation, because of the part of you that wonders about the child. That's not your weakness, Megan. That's the best thing about you. That's the thing that makes you worth more than any weapon they could ever build." His voice broke completely. "So come back up and be the human. Because the human saves people the weapon would let die. The human saved me, and I am standing here alive as the proof. Anchor home, Captain, anchor home. Come back to the part of you that's worth everything." For one long, terrible moment, nothing happened. Megan Carter stood with her weapon half raised deep under, in the place where it didn't hurt, and Jason Walker stood in front of her, unarmed, weeping, offering himself as living proof, and the entire operation held its breath. And then Megan Carter's weapon lowered. Her eyes came up, and they found Jason. And for the first time since she'd gone under, they saw him, actually saw him, a person looking at another person and knowing them. "Jason," she said, and her voice was raw and cracked and completely, entirely human. "You didn't run." "No, ma'am," Jason wept. "I'm done running from you. I told you that, and I meant it." And Megan Carter came all the way back up through the door, through the wound, through 2 years of pain, and she chose freely and fully to be the human who hesitates and wonders and saves people who don't deserve it, and she did not go under again, because the reason to come home had been standing right in front of her, alive, because of the very part of her she'd been trying to destroy. The extraction went clean. 9 hostages alive, 6 team members alive, and Megan Carter walking out of that compound on her own 2 feet, not carried, not lost, not gone, but present and whole and home. The man in local security dress, the one who had tried to peel the doorway away, was taken into custody by Cross's people, and what he revealed under questioning would eventually unravel the entire scheme, because he had been sent specifically with orders to ensure that Jason Walker did not survive to hold Megan Carter's way home. And that single fact, documented, witnessed, and impossible to deny, was the thread that finally pulled the whole thing apart. Because when Ryan Mitchell got the report, he did exactly what he had spent his whole career learning to do. He took it into the light. He did not go to the people in the windowless office. He went around them and above them and past them to the parts of the institution that still answered to daylight, and he laid it all out. A decorated officer requested by name for a mission designed to kill her. A support role deliberately targeted so she would die alone. An entire scheme built to eliminate a soldier not because she had failed, but because she had succeeded too well to be allowed to live an ordinary life. And the proof, the documented, witnessed, undeniable proof, was a man in custody who had confessed to being sent to murder the one person holding Megan Carter's way home. You cannot bury that in a file. 43 people had witnessed the beginning, 6 had witnessed the middle, and a confession had witnessed the end. The story was too big, too documented, too full of reliable people who remembered too clearly. The very thing the people in the windowless office had feared most, a story they could not contain, had come fully true. The windowless office was closed. quietly the way such things are always done but closed. The people who had built the scheme found themselves one by one moved into roles where they could do no further harm or moved out entirely. There was no trial because that is not how that world works, but there was an ending and Megan Carter had survived to see it. 3 weeks later, at the Advanced Tactical Readiness Center in Colorado, a new program began. It did not have a dramatic name. It was listed on the training schedule as an advanced instruction module, and the instructor of record was Captain Megan Carter. But everyone who mattered it knew what it really was. It was the door she had asked Ryan Mitchell to build. The one that let a soldier be good at the hardest thing in the world without it eating her alive. The one that taught the operators who were going to go down into the dark how to come back up, not how to be a weapon. Everyone already knew how to make weapons. Megan Carter taught the one thing no one else on earth could teach, which was how to be a weapon and a person at the same time, and how to come home. Her first class had 43 students, which was not a coincidence because the entire base had requested to attend, and the entire base had been told there was room for exactly the number of people who had witnessed the morning that started all of it. Jason Walker sat in the front row. He had put in for a transfer to become her permanent teaching partner, the man who had learned to hold the doorway for the operators she trained, because someone had to teach that job too, and he had discovered that he was born for it. The man who had held up her target sheet and laughed had become the anchor she trusted with her soul. And he wore that transformation, not with pride, but with a quiet, permanent humility, because he never forgot how close he had come to being the loudest fool in the room. Master Chief Daniel Brooks stood at the back, the old instructor who had refused to sign the paperwork, who had watched her clear a house in the dark and trusted his instincts over the numbers. He had delayed his retirement to help her build the program because he had decided that after 30 years of sending people out into the dark, he wanted to spend whatever was left teaching them how to come back. Colonel Ann Fielding had not lost her career after all. The story that could not be contained had protected her too, because you cannot punish the officer who refused to sign away a war hero once the whole institution knows the hero was a hero. She sat in the second row and she had told Megan privately that refusing to sign that one piece of paper was the proudest moment of 26 years of service. And Ryan Mitchell stood beside Megan at the front of the room, the man who had built the weapon and then spent everything he had to save the person, and the guilt he had carried for 2 years was not entirely gone, because guilt like that never entirely goes, but it had transformed into something he could live with, which was purpose. Megan Carter looked out at the room full of people who had refused to let her disappear, and she began to teach. Most of you know some version of what happened here, she said. You saw part of it, you heard the rest. And I know that a lot of you have spent the last few weeks thinking of me as the soldier who did the impossible on that scenario. She paused. I want to tell you the truth, and the truth is the opposite of what you think. The impossible thing I did was not clearing that scenario. Anyone with enough training and a broken enough soul can be turned into something that clears scenarios. That part is easy. That part is just engineering. Her voice steadied and she looked at Jason. The impossible thing I did was come back, and I could not have done it alone. I did it because a man who had every reason to let me fall chose instead to stand in front of the most dangerous version of me and remind me that the part of me that hesitates, the part that wonders, the part that saves people who don't deserve it, is the part worth keeping. The room was silent. They will teach you how to go into the dark, Megan said. Plenty of people can teach you that. What almost nobody can teach you is how to come back out of it still human. Because the dark makes you an offer. It says, down here, it doesn't hurt. Down here, you're never too slow. Down here, you never have to feel the worst thing you've ever felt. And it is the easiest thing in the world to accept that offer and never come home. She looked around the room. My job, the only job that matters in this room, is to teach you how to refuse it. How to keep the part of you that hurts, because the part that hurts is the part that saves people. And to make sure that every single one of you has someone whose job is to stand at the door and call you back and to be that person for someone else. She let that settle over the room. Because I am going to tell you the one thing I learned at the very bottom in the place where it didn't hurt, Megan Carter said. The strongest thing a soldier can do is not to become a weapon. Anyone can become a weapon. The strongest thing a soldier can do is carry the worst thing that ever happened to them and still choose every single day and to come home as a person. And no one has to carry it alone. That is not weakness. That is the whole point. The ones who try to carry it alone are the ones we lose. The ones who let people hold the door are the ones who come home. She looked at every face in the room. Never confuse silence with weakness. Never confuse struggle with failure. And never ever underestimate the person everyone has already decided is broken, because that person may be the only one strong enough to carry what you cannot even imagine. And the only thing that have ever needed is for someone to believe they were worth bringing home. The room came to its feet, not on command, not in formation. Just 43 people standing for a woman they had almost thrown away, who had gone all the way to the bottom of herself and come back to teach them the way home. And Megan Carter, who 3 weeks and a lifetime ago had been the biggest disappointment that center had ever seen, stood at the front of the room as living proof of the only truth that had ever mattered. A person is not defined by their worst moment. A person is not the sum of their failures. And the soldier everyone wanted gone had turned out to be the one person strong enough to teach them all how to survive being strong. She was not the weapon they had built. She never had been. She was the human who came home. And she would spend the rest of her career making sure that every soldier who went into the dark had someone waiting at the door to call them back into the light. That was her victory, not the scenario, not the mission, not the enemies undone. Her victory was this: she came home a person, and she made sure no one after her would ever have to make that journey alone. And that is the strongest thing a soldier will ever do.